तो यहाँ पे जो important चीज़ है, let's go into this one, which is to understand the web servers. Let me see if I have IIS over here. Right. ये मैंने समझाया था, IIS is the Windows web server. Apache वाले Linux के ऊपर Apache and various different things are there, right? ये मेरा web server है, and these are the websites. So websites are basically app services, are basically websites, और जो compute है on which it is running is the app service plan, right? If I do browse over here, right, this is what's running over here. Okay, HTTP localhost. I can do it on this browser as well. I can say HTTP localhost. Right. ये मेरी वेबसाइट यहाँ पे रन कर रही है. I can do this also. Localhost is nothing but 127.0.0.1. Right. Again, same thing, nothing special. And I can say also AK. I think my machine name. Machine name नहीं आया. How can I get machine name? I can set the DNS entry in my local this one, right? ये मैंने बताया था आपको कि जो local DNS है, you can do it like this. कि मैं इसके अंदर if I change the host file, right? So just to show you, once it opens up, right? So see. System 32 drivers etc. ये हर एक के पास ये फाइल अवेलेबल है. You can take a look. And for example, मेरी machine name is AK Lenovo. I can do this one as well. ये मैंने लिखा है. For example, I can say I can do this. Okay. So if I do this, Control S, and I say, right? Hopefully it will go. Yeah, so it is. Up same website hai. So I can set my local DNS over here, right? It checks मेरी जो host file है, and then it can redirect it to the whatever the IP address is. तो यहाँ मैंने IP address दिया हुआ है इसको 127.0.0.1. Sorry, it is in the other one, right? ये मैंने आपको बताया था क्लास में भी. तो you can do whatever, okay? इसका मैंने मल्टीपल वो किए हुए नाम दिए हुए. I can do this as well. इन सारों के ऊपर it will go to the same IP address, right? Went to the same IP address. I can do this one as well. तो अब यहाँ पे जो भी word what happened? Anyway, web 01. Right. So you can see that I can play with DNS entries in this file using key value pairs, and it works fine. Okay. So that was the idea, background information to where we are going towards, right? But it's important to understand what you need to do. What is the role of host file, and it becomes very, very critical in real life environments where you want to play with services, and you can do the mapping over here instead of in the actual DNS. Right. अब इसके अंदर जो important points हैं, right, which is this one, right? ये quiz में भी मैंने 2 सवाल दिए थे आपको इसमें से. You need to understand automatic scaling doesn't start until you have the standard. Deployment do not start until you have the standard. ठीक है? और more than one instance is only available from basic, and right, you do not get extra instances, and doesn't make sense, right? It's free and shared instance to begin with, right? So understand these kind of things, right? Here you need to understand कि shared compute के अंदर on the same compute somebody else applications are running. जहाँ पे आपको dedicated मिल रहा है compute, which is basic, standard and premium, उसके अंदर वर्चुअल मशीन के ऊपर सिर्फ आपकी एप्लीकेशंस चल रही होती हैं, राइट? और उसके बाद जो फाइनली जो आइसोलेटेड है This means आपकी not only VM is yours, the network is yours as well. ठीक है? This is the app service plan. So just to show you, sorry. यहाँ पे go into this thing and I say app service plan. Yes, I want to discard. App service plans. So if I create, let me see isolated one. How do I create? It used to be, oh, sorry. अब मैंने उसके अंदर, so in isolated we create something called app service environment, but don't need to go into too much details of this. यहाँ पे you can see कि इसके अंदर यहाँ पे networking. So app service environment जो है, don't go into the, I don't want to go too much into the details. Idea is कि app service plan, when it is isolated, right, then it is, यहाँ पे इस तरह हम इसका virtual network pick करते हैं, right? We can pick any of the VNet, right? And इसकी थोड़ी सी और complexity है setup की, but regardless, it allows us to create to make it on a specific VNet. So idea is कि isolated app service plans जो हैं, they allow us to host our plans and the क्या कहते हैं हमारा app services on specific dedicated VNets. This is very important distinction, right? So you should understand कि shared में आपको क्या मिल रहा है, dedicated में क्या मिल रहा है और आपको isolated में क्या मिल रहा है, right? This is very critical. App service, ये मैंने बताया था यहाँ पे, app service is like a website. App service is equivalent to website, and app service plan is equivalent to the compute, right? जो मेरी machine है, that is the app service plan. You provide the compute, and it's obvious, right? If you come over here, अगर मैं कहूँ app service plan बनाना है, if you look at it, app service plan बनाऊंगा, तो it is looking, यहाँ पे आपको बता रहे हैं आपको कितना कंप्यूट चाहिए, राइट? App service plan is basically telling you आपको कंप्यूट कितना चाहिए. That tells you it is a virtual machine. An app service is the web application. जब मैं यहाँ पे जाऊँगा app service में, right? If I create a web app, the app service is a name of the services. Underneath there are web apps and different things, right? So app service is basically a web app. Whether it's static web app, regular web app with database or whatever, it is a web app, right? So यहाँ पे you can see it asks for a app service plan कि आपने किस compute के ऊपर आपने इसको host करना है, right? So this is what it is, right? Scalability के अंदर again you should understand there's a manual scale and auto scale, right? And again यहाँ पे आपको यहाँ पे आपको मैनुअल स्केल मिल रहा है, यहाँ पे आपको ऑटो स्केल नहीं मिल रहा. क्यों नहीं मिल रहा? यहाँ आपको किस तरह कह रहे हो मैनुअल स्केल? क्योंकि बिकॉज इट कैन गो टू 3 instances. If it can go to 3 instances but no auto scaling, that means you can scale it to 3 instances but manually. Okay, so understand this point very clearly from over here. Okay, so if I ask you कि manually scale करना है for testing purposes to multiple instances in the best possible, in the cheapest possible way, then you should know that you can use the basic app service plan to do that, right? I don't need to spend this kind of money. I can test scalability and test my application over a highly scaled environment, over a scalable environment, using the basic plan. Okay, and this is what usually is done as well when people are developing. They can use these kind of things. ये scale up and scale out. Scale up is essentially आप जो करते हो app service plan के अंदर, if I have this one, right, scale up is I want to upgrade the compute, I want a bigger compute, so I can do this one. For example, if I do for example scale up, right, so I can do scale up and I can say I want a bigger compute than what I have. And scale out is I want more instances or more features, right? वो बता रहे कि मैं यहाँ पे हूँ, I can go to these ones, right? And it has these kind of extra things. It has this much more CPUs, it has this much more memory, and this has the all these things, right? So I can pick these things. I can do from features also. और फीचर का आपको दिखा रहा है कि क्या चीज़ें अवेलेबल हैं. यहाँ पे मेरे पास ये सब चीज़ें हैं. यहाँ पे it's not elastic, right? I'll go into those things later on. No, don't worry about the elastic part right now, right? यहाँ पे आपको scale out के अंदर you will actually see the features in a much better way. Right? यहाँ पे मुझे बता रहे हैं कि इस वक्त फॉर एग्जांपल आई कैन डू ऑटोमेटिक एंड इवेंट्स रूल बेस्ड. Automatic is I guess elastic, this is the elastic one, right? And rule based, and I can do the ruling, right? Okay, ruling will be rules will be ignored if automatic is. Again, no need to go into the details. Main thing is कि यहाँ पे आपने वो करना है scale out and this is scale up. यहाँ पे if I do for example from feature perspective, right? Let's see what else is available. ये मुझे डाउनग्रेड नहीं करने दे रहा, right? This is an important concept to understand. Again, I think somewhere it mentions also you cannot downgrade from. So अगर आपने बड़ा कर लिया plan, you cannot go down. You can only go up, right? So if I do this one, let's say P3 V3 is the biggest one, I think. आपको छोटा नहीं बनाने देगा. If I go back into this one, right? This is the free one. If I यहाँ पे मैं scaling करूँगा इसकी, if I say scale up, right? Now you can see I have every option available, right? Premium, standard, basic, and everything, right? So you can only go up. You cannot come down. Okay? Be very clear on this one. And it's mentioned somewhere also. I think in the notes it's mentioned somewhere. Anyway, not very important for this one. But understand what does scale up means and what does scale out means, right? Scale up hardware, features, and all those. कहाँ पे ऑप्शन गिवन है? यहाँ पे कर रहे हो ना आप? मैं उसका बता दो आपने किस तरह स्केल आउट करना है उसका. ठीक है, आपने किस तरह करना है. आप स्केलिंग आउट उसकी सेटअप कर रहे हो ना उसकी. इसमें तो अवेलेबल नहीं है, राइट? इसके अंदर अवेलेबल नहीं है, बट दूसरे के अंदर ऑफ कोर्स अवेलेबल थी. आई डिडंट टच इट. हाँ, वो कह रहे हैं आपने किस तरह स्केल आउट करना है. मैं कह रहा हूँ मैनुअली करना है आपने, राइट? कि मैं उसके इतने इंस्टेंसेस कर रहा हूँ, मैं रूल बेस कर रहा हूँ. एंड आई कैन स्टार्ट अप विद दिस वन. आई कैन से आप शुरू इसको 3 से करो और फिर उसको ऑटोमेटिक स्केल कर लो, या ऑटोमेटिक कर लो, मैनुअल कर लो, उसके इंस्टेंस कर दो, या रूल बेस कर लो. सारे आप वो कर रहे हो उसके. ठीक है, यू कैन कन्फिगर. तो दिस इज स्केलिंग आउट बेसिकली, राइट? यहाँ पे कह दो कस्टम ऑटो स्केल, right? And I can do various different conditions. I can do conditions. I can do various different things over here, right? So yes, you can do that. वो मैंने किया नहीं था उसको, but you can take all do all kind of conditions. यहाँ पे खुद it will determine कि it is maxing out, I will add more instances, right? So this is a new option they added basically, so you don't have to worry about setting up the rules or anything, right? And for most of the people it works out fine. ठीक है, लेकिन generally rule based is essentially where you want to say कि it is based on आपको schedule के ऊपर and all those things, right? You have all those options available to you. Again, look at the key gist and understand from a conceptual perspective what is available, what things are there, right? From a perspective of these things, this functionality, right? तो उन्होंने वो एक आपको बताया हुआ है, ये schedule का मैंने आपको बताया था, you can schedule based on, you can scale based on a schedule. और आप कंबाइन कर सकते हो, आप स्केड्यूल भी कर लो और उस स्केड्यूल के दौरान यू कैन डू मैट्रिक्स भी ऐड कर लो उसके अंदर, ठीक है, इसके दौरान. और यू कैन से इफ दिस डजंट हैपन देन डोंट स्केल, राइट? यू कैन डू लॉट ऑफ दीज थिंग्स, राइट? लॉट ऑफ वेरी लॉट ऑफ कॉम्बिनेशंस यू कैन डू. इसके अंदर जो इम्पोर्टेंट चीज़ मैंने आपको बताई थी वो ये थी कि अगर आप कोड करोगे, it will ask you for the runtime stack, it will ask you for the operating system. और अगर आप कंटेनर करोगे, it will only ask you for the it will only ask you, if I do this, create web app, only ask you for the operating system. ठीक है, या मैं कंटेनर करूंगा, runtime stack will go away, which makes sense, right? Because कंटेनर के अंदर all the stack is there. And then once you have this one, you can pick and I can pick, for example, Windows. It says new, and if I say Linux, is it there already? दोनों के अंदर is creating new one, right? I can say new one, I can say ASP, and this is ASP, and this is how we usually do Canada Central, right? ताकि मैं पता हो कि कौन सा ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम है इसका और कहाँ किस रीजन के अंदर है, right? This is how you do these kind of things, so you can see just from the name. Operating system is always there, right? Operating system is always there. Code के लिए runtime stack is there as well. वो कह रहा है आपके पास है already where you can use this one, right? Windows और ये मैं किया, वो कह रहा है you can use an existing one, ठीक है? Your free one, you can use it for this one, for this application. फिर हमने डिप्लॉयमेंट स्लॉट्स पढ़ी थी ऐप सर्विस प्लान वेब एप्स के अंदर. And deployment slots allow you to deploy multiple versions of the applications with the same settings. जब हम डिप्लॉयमेंट स्लॉट बनाते हैं उसकी, तो हमारे से पूछता है अपने सेटिंग्स कॉपी करनी है, और यहाँ पे मैंने किया था फॉर एग्जांपल. And not only that, you can start sending some traffic also over here as well, right? If I say, let me see if I do 20, right? तो यहाँ पे जो main है उसके ऊपर तो आनी है मेरी production है, right? You can do lot of these things, right? That allows you to test your application which is not in production, but to be able to handle traffic and make sure everything is okay. So it has very nice ways, right? And then finally you can do swap. आप कहते हो ये मेरी एप्लीकेशन है, टेस्टिंग एप्लीकेशन है विद द सेम सेटिंग एज प्रोडक्शन, एंड आई वांट टू नो एवरीथिंग इज ओके. मैंने थोड़ी सी ट्रैफिक भी, लाइव ट्रैफिक इसके ऊपर लेके आया हूँ 20%, एवरीथिंग इज वर्किंग फाइन, आई वांट टू मूव दिस टू प्रोडक्शन. तो आप कहते हो स्वैप करो इसको. सॉरी, मैं इसको सेव कर लूँ पहले सेटिंग्स को, राइट? एंड नाउ आई कैन डू स्वैप. वो कहते हैं आपने क्या स्वैप करना है, तो सोर्स है मेरा ये है, target is this, I want to swap this thing, right? And then I can say okay, swap. वो slot change भी दिखा देगा कोई changes हुई, and then you can start swap, right? So this will go become a production, and that will become test. Your slot will become production, and they'll become test. So this will essentially start handling 80% of traffic. This will start handling 20% of the traffic, right? This is a very, very nice way to go into production and to roll back and to deploy new changes and all that, right? So it's a very, very nice way they designed this one, right? Without any downtime. So it is both features and scale. It was very nice and very well designed feature basically to do to get this functionality. इसमें application setting, when you're copying between slots, you can specify कि ये setting जो है it will stick to the slot. It will not get copied, right? You can say this one. So when you copy the settings, जहाँ पे आपने कहोगे this is a slot specific setting, it will not get copied. Right? So now you can see that it has switched those things. जो यहाँ पे था production के अंदर था, this has become production, and this has become test now, right? ये मैंने बताया था कि slot आप add कर रहे हो, यहाँ पे जो slot level setting है, right? I can say, for example, dev, right? And I can say clone settings from test, for example, or if this was my master copy, right? I can do this one, my production. वहाँ से मैंने सारी सेटिंग, इसमें environment variables होंगे, उसके अंदर connection strings होंगे, and what not. So I can test those things with the same environment setting to make sure everything is okay. This is a very, very powerful feature with lot of functionality, right? That can be used. ये जो production में होता है, issues आते हैं, they have made this one based on that one. Based on those issues, they have designed this one. और यहाँ पे आप settings लोगे, for example, environment variables, जो मैं कह रहा हूँ, right? And you can see कि यहाँ पे वो कह रहा है कि is a deployment slot setting. अगर यहाँ पे मैं जा रहा हूँ, for example, I can say deployment slot settings and apply, right? So now it is sitting to, it is stuck to, for example, deployment slot. Behind the scenes is just a JSON file, right? So anyway, so this is what it was, right? तो आप उसे कहते हैं डिप्लॉय, ये इस स्लॉट की डिप्लॉयमेंट सेटिंग है, एंड देन यू कैन से दैट इट शुड नॉट गेट कॉपीड, राइट? इसमें मैंने बताया था यू कैन सेट अप डिफरेंट ऑथेंटिकेशन, यू कैन थर्ड पार्टी आइडेंटिटी प्रोवाइडर. ये माइक्रोसॉफ्ट ने सारा कोड किया हुआ ऑलरेडी. यू कैन जस्ट सिंपली कन्फिगर और उसके अंदर उसकी सिक्योरिटी के अंदर, एंड यू कैन से आई वांट टू बी एबल टू एक्सेप्ट identities from all these guys or some of these guys, right? It's all plug and play kind of thing. Custom domains, इसमें जो critical part है यहाँ पे, that you need to create a CNAME when you have up to the premium app service plan, क्योंकि आपको domain मिल रहा है, और a record बनेगा for isolated plans because it has an IP address. It doesn't have a domain name because it is deployed on your own network. This is not sitting on Microsoft network and Microsoft domain, जो isolated है. So please be very clear, a record कब बनेगा? When it is isolated plan, because it is private IP address. जबकि CNAME बनेगा for everything else, you need to create a CNAME record. Okay? Backups, I didn't cover too much, don't worry about it too much, but just make sure you go over it. You can manually, आप manual कर सकते हो उसको backup, schedule बना सकते हो, so it can back up everything basically, right? And it does require standard or premium plan. So based on these requirements, basically, you pick the right app service plan, okay? When you come to containers, इसमें basically we have essentially the idea is over here that you have यहाँ पे आपको hypervisor layer नहीं है, right? तो यहाँ पे isolation कम होती है because you are all using the same host operating system. जबकि यहाँ पे operating system is all same, but they are heavier, but at the expense of a little bit heavy and more resource hungry, you get full isolation from everybody else, right? This is the important part in these ones, right? And so each in चीज़ों के लिए you have to understand isolation इनकी it's less. You're using the same operating system, and these are much more isolation, right? Operating system over here it is shared. Over here they are completely isolated in the operating system, right? Persistent storage, we discussed this one. Our deployment will come into all these 5 points in the next slide basically, right? So यहाँ पे isolation, we discussed this one. Operating system, how it is used and how it is isolated over here. यहाँ पे deployment, it is done through Docker, command line, or Kubernetes through the orchestrator, right? This is how you get deployed. And over here you get from the Hyper-V manager or System Center Virtual Machine Manager. Hyper-V manager is this, right? So this is basically like management console है Windows के ऊपर, which basically allows you to deploy virtual machines, right? I can say new virtual machine, and new virtual machine I can say Windows 11 VM generation Gen 2 memory networking. I can do, for example, this hard disk installation options. I can, from a bootable operating system, let's say ISO file, if I have something. Let me see if I have any ISO file. Yes, I have Windows 11. Okay. यहाँ पे start करेगा, VM बना ली उसने, and I've given it the drive दे दी मैंने उसको, and I can start this one, right? I can start this, and I can connect with the Hyper-V manager के अंदर I'm doing all these things, right? Let's see if it starts. So it's just like starting a brand new computer. Boot image was not found, did not load an operating system. Not sure. मैं इसको एक और करता हूँ, एक और चीज़ करता हूँ इसको, just to show you guys. Virtual machine. I can say Win 11. My generation is gonna. I will make it Gen 1. I just make it Windows 10. Okay. The Hyper-V manager, it allows you to set up the networking in the hypervisor, और आपको you can start the virtual machine. And मैंने start किया virtual machine, ठीक है? So it's starting up just like a new computer, और यहाँ पे it'll try to connect, it'll try to start, and you can see it starts off just like एक नया computer है, उसके ऊपर Windows की boot drive डली हुई है, and it's about creating a new virtual machine, right? And it goes starts with the installation, right? So this is Hyper-V Manager, this is Hyper-V, this is a virtual machine. It's completely isolated virtual machine. इसकी अपनी hard disk बनी हुई है in Windows, special वो file है, and I can say I don't have a product key right now, and I can say home, or I can do, for example, Pro, whatever the version is. Anyway, I'll continue with, let me see if it continues. Anyway, we may have some issue. But anyway, you can see that I can start the installation and can configure and do all these things, right? So then the important चीज़ यहाँ पे, how do you use the storage? This is the important one. ये मैंने quiz में भी question दिया था. Make sure you cover all those points, right? मैं SMB भी दे सकता हूँ इसको, मैं इसको non SMB भी दे सकता हूँ, container भी मैं कर सकता हूँ इसको, just to give अगर इसमें multiple containers ने share करना है. So make sure you understand that point. Make sure you go over all the quiz questions and understand and read them properly, okay? और यहाँ पे जो disk है, I create a direct disk. मैं VHD बनाता हूँ. No need to go into this one. I don't want you to go into the virtual machines and all that. But यहाँ पे मैं directly I can do the same thing. I can do an SMB file share. I can do to the virtual machines, and I can do local storage also. I can do the same thing. Fault tolerance, मैंने क्लास में बताया था. Fault tolerance is not by default inherent in any of those things. यहाँ पे clustering है Windows के अंदर, which allows the VM to fail over to a secondary node, और यहाँ पे आपके पास वो है, क्या कहते हैं, orchestrator है, which sees if it's not running, it starts off on the other node and whatever, right? That is an important point. Both things do not have inherent capabilities. फिर हमने containers के अंदर we started looking into के what is ACI. So ACI is just a container environment. You have to do everything else. So idea is the quickest way to run a container. The quickest way to run a container. आपने drop key and it starts running. All it allows you to do is इसको आप वो कर देते हैं आपको a little bit of orchestration capability, which is to restart. That's about it, right? And of course, you can do multiple containers deploy as a container group. ये मैंने आपको एग्जांपल दी थी. कंटेनर ग्रुप है, एक कंटेनर है, उसके अंदर आपकी एप्लीकेशन और वेब सर्वर है, दूसरे के अंदर आपकी मे बी डेटाबेस है, एंड यू हैव गिवन स्टोरेज टू बोथ ऑफ देम, राइट? आपकी वेब एप्लीकेशन है, इट्स राइटिंग ओवर हियर, ये आपकी डेटाबेस है, इट्स राइटिंग इट्स फाइल्स टू द स्टोरेज, एंड दिस गाय इज कनेक्टिंग टू दिस गाय इंटरनली, and this guy is exposed outside, right? So yeah, you can do in ACI a simple stuff very nicely, right? If you don't want too much orchestration and all that, and you can create container group, right? In an ACI. फिर हमने we went into a little bit into Docker platform understanding, right? उसने कहा था कि सारी जो हैं images, they are sitting on the internet in Docker Hub. Everyone सारे के सारे जो अपने इमेज जो है वो बना के they upload on Docker Hub, which is essentially just a container registry. You can have your private registries, and Azure allows you to have your own registry, right? यहाँ पे अगर आप जाओ इसके अंदर, यहाँ पे you can say ACR, let me see if it comes up, container registry, right? Container registries are over here. And you can say you can create your own registry, and it allows you to deploy your own containers to your own registry and push them to Kubernetes or ACI, as well as app services, container वाली जो app services हैं उनके अंदर, ठीक है? So we can do this one. And this kind of registry, you can deploy on the network also. यहाँ पे अगर आप प्रीमियम करोगे, it allows you to pick your own network. ये सिर्फ वो है उसके अंदर कैपेबिलिटी है प्रीमियम के अंदर. But anyway, don't need to go into. But idea is GitHub Docker Hub is essentially what we call a container registry. And in Azure, you can create a private container registry where you deploy your containers and images, right? And basically, आपका जो host है, Docker host means where your runtime is running, right? ये मैंने आपको बताया था. यहाँ पे this is my where I have Docker desktop, and this is my Docker host where the runtime is running, right? The images are your running form का image in a running form is called a container, and I can deploy an image multiple times. I can run it multiple times, right? If I'm running a web application or whatever, right? If I run it multiple times for scalability, for whatever reason, right? But generally we want the orchestrator to do that. Docker client, for example, I have, whenever we talk about client and servers, right? All these applications are, if I do this, for example, Docker, right? This is a client running. Let it finish. Yeah, Docker Hub is what we call a registry. It's a public registry. Registry means where all images are uploaded. Okay. For example, just to show you, आप जब image बताते हो, for example, if I go to Docker Hub, hub.docker.com, and you can pull any image from over here to run it locally, right? यहाँ पे you can see every company has deployed their stuff over here. ठीक है? अब what is this one? अब PyTorch is a machine learning framework. अब इन्होंने क्या किया हुआ है? They have configured with all the latest stuff in a container with the latest क्या कहते हैं सारा everything configured, right? So if I do this one, so instead of installing configuring all these things, वो कहते हैं जी आपको कि इसके अंदर हर चीज़ इंस्टॉल है with the latest one, ठीक है? That is the idea, and that is the beauty of this, right? Right. So I can do is any company can deploy instead कि आप ये configure करो सारे frameworks with all the dependencies, वो आपको एक container बना के दे देंगे with all the latest dependencies, everything fully configured, and you just run it, right? So this is the beauty of this one, right? I can say this thing, और इसके कंटेनर के साथ अपना स्टोरेज बनाओ, स्टोरेज के अंदर अपनी नोटबुक्स एंड जुपिटर नोटबुक्स एंड इनपुट, एंड यू कैन डू ऑल ऑफ दोस थिंग्स, राइट? Anyway, I need to check what's happening with my Docker. Maybe a Docker engine starting, or maybe it's that's what's acting up. Anyway, so that's how you do it, right? You get the यहाँ पे इन्होंने everybody has deployed the public images of their software over here. सारे images are over here. You can see every sort of software is over here, right? Everything, all configured, everything. Apache का HTTP server है, MongoDB, MySQL, everything in a container. You just अपने Docker desktop में जाके you just pull it and it runs, right? It just starts running without doing any configuration. This is the beauty of this thing, right? So ये सारा कुछ जो हो रहा है, it's happening on the Docker Hub. यहाँ से you can pull it, right, to your machine. Let me see. Okay, अब यहाँ पे run हो रहा है. Let's see if I can pull that thing. वो सर्विस नहीं रन हो रही थी. I think it should be okay now. Let's see. ये मैं यहाँ से भी कर सकता हूँ. By the way, I can give it the name. हाँ, बाहर है वो, ठीक है. So you can see it's pretty big, 3.622 gig, क्योंकि सारी libraries हैं, everything is there, right? So it can do that, it will do this, right? So this is the way you build these days software. Kept existing libraries, everything is fully configured. You can get the container and you can start developing against it, right? And you can bind your storage to it. जिसके अंदर आपकी सारी वो notebooks और आपका code पड़ा हुआ है, and then you can use it, right? So it's very nice way to do all of this stuff. कुछ आपको करने की जरूरत नहीं है, सारी libraries, all the dependencies, everything is there. I let it run. तो वो कंटेनर रजिस्ट्री थी. By default it's configured that it goes to hub.docker.com. You can configure it to go to Azure की registry के ऊपर भी. You can configure the docker command to go to your registry. By default it's supposed to go to hub.docker.com, right? But you can make it go to your own registry on Azure as well. No problem with that one. I think उसकी भी commands है. I don't want to go into that one. But anyway, Docker का हमने client हमने run किया था अभी, and then it talks to Docker server that is running, that does the image pull and all these things, right? And then we give the command to run those images, and then it creates the containers to deploy those things, okay? Again, understand the client server architecture. हम ये utilities use कर रहे हैं, these are the client part, and the server part is running in the background, right? That it talks to. You can see also ये सारे मेरे pods run कर रहे हैं, ये मेरे images यहाँ पे deploy हुए हैं सारे, right? All these images are being deployed, and ये volumes हैं जो हमने claim volume और जो कर रहे थे हम यहाँ पे, you can create volumes over here, right? And we can attach them to the different things, right? आप Kubernetes के अंदर that was उसका नाम था for example क्या था उसका, we'll come into that one for a second. मेरे ज़हन से निकल गया एकदम, right? So anyway, then we go a little bit deep dive into AKS, right? It's a whole course in its own. we have just touched the surface, और हमने उसके अंदर बताया था pools are essentially a group of nodes. Nodes are nothing but virtual machines, or we call them nodes because these are virtual machines which are running the some specific containers. उसके अंदर container runtime है, and they're registered with the Kubernetes, and it is running some specific pods that will work with the server to control your environment, right? Pod is a single instance, is a single unit of deployment, और उसके अंदर it can have one container or multiple containers, right? Then deployment is essentially when we do the deployment is simply the YAML file, right? We call that a deployment. कि हमारी ये deployment है, it contains the deployment, how it will be deployed and how it will tell Kubernetes, right? And manifest is the actual YAML file, right? Nothing special. We call उसको हम manifest कहते हैं YAML file को, right? And YAML file is basically for Kubernetes, it's a single deployment. It can have multiple deployments. I can define pods, I can define services, I can define batch in a single YAML file, and that means that YAML file will have multiple deployments for Kubernetes, right? It is telling Kubernetes to deploy those things. So deployments are essentially contained with the YAML file, and you can have one or more. अभी जिस तरह हमने वो था persistent volume claim था, right? That is a deployment. मैं उसके अंदर उसी फाइल के अंदर I can put the YAML code for pods as well, right? I can put all of those things together. मुझे separate बनाने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, but we do create separate files, right? Usually, ताकि we can change one without affecting the other one, right? ये मैंने आपको बताया था Azure Disk, Azure Files हम क्यों यूज़ कर रहे हैं. यहाँ पे एक और चीज़ मैंने आपको बताई थी कि Kube proxy हम क्यों इस्तेमाल करते हैं when we want to deploy expose any container as a service outside, then kube proxy comes in. It puts the specific rules to expose a container outside over the virtual network card of the virtual machine, which is basically the node in the AKS cluster. Okay. So understand this one, what is the use of kubelet, container runtime, and kube proxy in the AKS node. फिर हमने बताया था कि what do we want to do, right? We want to attack, if you want to use storage, क्योंकि कंटेनर के अंदर उसकी इतनी स्टोरेज नहीं होती, so you want to provide the storage so it can do its work and it can save the work, right? It can save its work as well. तो उसके लिए फिर हमने दो चीज़ें बनाई थी, persistent claim, persistent volume and persistent claim, right? Volume claim. Let me just see. Sorry. Right. So persistent volume is a storage resource created, managed by Kubernetes API, right? Whether a pod exists or doesn't exist, it does not matter, right? And volume claim is the definition of a storage. For example, मैंने उसकी डिफरेंट वो दे दी, क्या कहते हैं, क्लेम इज बेसिकली राइट कि 5 gig का होगा, प्रीमियम होगा एंड ऑल दैट, एंड दिस गाय कैन रिक्वेस्ट दिस क्लेम, ठीक है, तो उसको इस तरह की स्टोरेज मिल जाएगी, राइट? दैट्स द आइडिया. ये स्टोरेज डेफिनेशन है persistent volume claim, and that is then used to create the persistent volume based on this claim. So that will be premium disk मिल जाएगी 5 GB की. Mount path की मैंने को बताया था, Linux uses this one. So if I do this one, if you look at the Linux part from WSL, we can take a look. If I go into, okay, you can see C, G drive, FS01, FS02, ये मेरी वहाँ से आ रही हैं actually Azure से, right? And they're different drives. So I can go to C, right? ये मेरी सारी C drive दिखा रहा है. So all my storage from C drive is available over there. I can do whatever. But understand, my storage is available under the file system, Mount C. जबकि हमारा Windows में it's very different, right? But idea is exactly same, right? अगर मैं अभी भी करूँ अपना ये क्या कहते हैं, ये मेरी वो है, और होम डायरेक्टरी सिटिंग समवेयर एल्स आल्सो, मेरा पास छोटा दिखा रहा है but it's sitting somewhere, right, in one of the drives in some folder. तो ये छोटा नाम करके दिखा रहा है मुझे, but anyway you get the idea. ये Linux वो है drive path where the storage is made available, where this 5 GB will be available under this name. So this thing is mount, this thing is made available under this folder name. तो यहाँ Azure के अंदर Azure folder will be 5 GB basically with the storage, right? And I can do whatever over here, right? So understand this one. This is just the way Linux does it. Windows में ये चीज़ आपको C, D drive में इस तरह करके नजर आएगी, right? If I create new drive, it will show it like this. C drive, आप drive letter दोगे and यहाँ पे you give it a folder name, right? It shows it under this, right? That's the difference. Understand this one, please. Cluster autoscaler scales out. It's used to scale the nodes. Pod autoscaler is used to scale the pods. Main thing is it checks the metrics API every 15 seconds. Please understand this one, okay? और ये इसमें जो है और यहाँ पे भी जो cluster autoscaler है, right? It does the same thing. Metrics API server every 10 seconds, right? For any record, for any node count, changes in record count, right? जबकि HPA जो है, it does every 60 seconds. By default in replica count, हाँ ये देखो, replica count and metrics every 60 seconds. So HPA is updated every 60 seconds. Replica count is basically, I haven't touched it, so I will not cover it, leave it out, right? So main thing to understand is HPA, it checks every 60 seconds, and cluster autoscaler checks every 10 seconds. It checks the metrics API server. This is part of Kubernetes, right? Deployment. और ये शायद मैंने की भी है, इसकी यहाँ पे भी, let me just check. ये metric server है, right? From here, the clusters autoscaler and the horizontal pod scaler, it goes to this guy and checks the metrics, right? CPU कैसा है, आपकी वो कैसे हैं, क्या कहते हैं, memory कैसी है, and various different statistics to figure out whether it's going to deploy more nodes or it's going to deploy more pods. Okay, so understand this part. Metrics API server is part of Kubernetes deployment. Not by default, you have to add this one. Here it is, by the way, just to show you. Right, ये metric server है, देखो ये भी GitHub के ऊपर है, and you can deploy. For example, यहाँ पे command देता है वो, it will give you the command to deploy this one. One single command, it's a pod. यहाँ पे वो कहता है ये this one, right? You can deploy this one. मैंने किया था, and it deployed it like this. You can do it from the command line, from the kubectl. YAML file, you can take a look at the YAML, but anyway, it will have some containers and all that, right? Images होंगे that it needs to pull and it deploys, right? But ये मैंने किया था, वो कह रहा है आपके पास है already, you have everything already, so nothing is changed, right? You have it already. It checks my local stuff, right? And it is running already, so it didn't do anything. But यहाँ पे अभी जो मैंने किया था, that was क्या चीज़ मैंने डाउनलोड की थी, इमेज मैंने कौन सा डाउनलोड किया था, लेट मी जस्ट रिफ्रेश. मैंने वो किया था, कौन सा इमेज डाउनलोड किया था मैंने अभी, पाइटॉर्च, सॉरी पाइटॉर्च, एग्जैक्टली यहाँ पे नज़र आया है कि नहीं अभी, नॉट येट, और वहाँ से नज़र आ रहा है वैसे, मे बी इट्स नॉट डन येट, लेट मी सी क्या कर रहे हैं यहाँ पे. PyTorch था, I think it's not done yet, we'll wait, right? यहाँ पे configure करेगा इसके साथ इसको, then we'll see over here. ठीक है, so understand कि जो metrics API server है, it's part of Kubernetes deployment, और इसमें it checks to add the nodes every 10 seconds, cluster autoscaler and horizontal pod scaler, it checks every 1 minute, okay? We have not covered replicas. It's nothing more than कि pod की definition आप कहते हो कि इसके कितने instances होंगे इसके, but since I haven't covered, I don't want to touch it at this point, right? And cluster autoscaler, it also allows you to scale. ये सिर्फ एक setting है उसके अंदर, right? It's a very small setting in the Kubernetes to be able to say please burst into ACI. So instead of adding a node, node को जब add करते हो, it configures that virtual machine, right, with all the specific stuff. So instead of doing, which is usually quick, but you can have much quicker if you want temporarily, if you want to run the pods, right? So ACI के अंदर deploy करके it can run it very very quickly and does the required configuration. ये आ गया वैसे, now it is done. It says I'm done. It is there. Let's take a look. Right? ये आ गया यहाँ पे, right? It is there. अब for example आपने कहा इसके अंदर, for example where it is, PyTorch, right? इसके अंदर आप कहते हो कि मुझे इसके अंदर स्टोरेज चाहिए, you can add storage to this guy, right? ये दिखा हुआ सारी कमांड्स दिखा रहे हैं कि what they have done. उसमें देखो इन्होंने और जो सारी कमांड्स एवरीथिंग इज देयर टू शो यू, राइट? इन्होंने क्या क्या चीज़ें इंस्टॉल की हुई हैं इसके अंदर, एंड हाउ दे हैव बिल्ट दिस इमेज, राइट? कौन सी लेयर्स हैं, अगेन आई डोंट टू टच दीस थिंग्स अगेन, इट्स और क्या पैकेज इंस्टॉल किए हैं, क्या किया हुआ इन्होंने इसके अंदर, राइट? ऑल्सो इसके अंदर आप ये भी कर सकते हो, फॉर एग्जाम्पल यू कैन से यू कैन लेट मी सी, आई वांट टू, इसमें you can apply storage also. Let me see if I do storage. Anyway, I don't want to touch right now new topics. Leave it right now. So आप जो images लेके आते हो, you can attach storage to it as well, right? So it runs storage is available. Very similar to जो Kubernetes के अंदर हम कर रहे हैं. So go over this again. Or the core conceptual things, be very clear, nothing really special. Go over the quiz and all those things, make sure you cover those things clearly, right? Understand those things clearly. Let me stop the recording.